What's up, guys? I'm Cole, and this is Practical Faith. In this video, I'm going to talk about what I think Paul's thorn in the flesh was and why I think it matters. So stick around. Alright, before we really start digging, we've got to map out our dig area. And it's going to be 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 through 9. So Paul is speaking here, and he says, "And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice," 3 times, "that it might depart from me. And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me." So Paul does actually tell us what the thorn in the flesh was. He said it's a messenger of Satan sent to buffet him. But what message was that messenger bringing? And what does the word buffet even mean? When I was growing up, I was Jimmy buffeted by my stepdad all the time. And it was a painful experience. But I think it's actually something different here. The word buffet is translated as harass in the English Standard Version. It literally means to rap with your fist. So it can be something physical, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It can be something spiritual or emotional too. There are some people that think that Paul's thorn in the flesh was some kind of besetting sin, even some kind of sexual sin that Paul kept falling into. And that's the one view that I'm going to say is absolutely false. There's a lot of reasons for it. If you need more, I can give more later on. But right now, I'll just say that 1 Peter 4:1 says that if you've suffered in the flesh, you've ceased from sin. And I think the point that it's making is if you're willing to suffer in your body, physically, for the cause of Christ, then you're going to be able to bring your body into subjection so that you're not willfully or habitually sinning. And we know that Paul was suffering in the flesh. If you disagree with that, let me know why in the comments below. There's been a lot of ideas on this, and I think there are a lot that actually make quite a bit of sense. One is persecution. Maybe that messenger of Satan was stirring up people around Paul and causing them to persecute him in like a severe kind of way. Also, this could be some kind of physical condition that Paul's going through, and there's quite a few scriptures that seem to talk about that. Like he's preaching in his infirmity. He's writing large letters. People would be willing to pluck out their eyes to give them to him. Why would they need to do that unless there was some kind of problem with his eyesight? So I do think that that's a pretty good explanation. It's not my explanation, but I'm like probably 60-40 on that. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so now as I cue the graphic. I personally believe that Paul's thorn in the flesh was the memory of his past where he persecuted the church of God. And let me lay out a few reasons why I think this is the case. After his conversion, Saul changed his name to Paul. And I think a lot of that had to do with escaping his past. He'd become a new creature in Christ Jesus, so he wanted a new name. But he described himself in the past as a persecutor, as a blasphemer, and an insolent man. We know that Paul made havoc of the church. It means he ravaged the church. He went in and broke up assemblies and hauled people off to prison, and he gave consent unto the death of the saints. We're told that Paul received abundant revelation from the Lord, and one of the reasons for the thorn in the flesh was to keep him humble, or so that he's not exalted above measure. And we know that Paul was a humble man. In Ephesians 3, verse 8, he calls himself the least of all saints. He also calls himself the chief of sinners. And if I'm thinking about Paul, I'd say, no, you're the greatest of all saints. You're like the least of all sinners. But Paul didn't see himself that way. Why didn't he? In 1 Corinthians 15:9, he says, "For I am the least of the apostles, that I am not meet to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God." I personally believe that that messenger of Satan carried with him the message of Paul's past. And he may have come at Paul directly, like whispering things into his ear. Or he may have stirred up people around Paul to remind Paul of who he used to be. That's a powerful weapon in his arsenal. I know that Satan lies on people all the time, but if he can take a truth or even a half-truth and use that, he's going to use it. Because he can come to Paul and say, Paul, this is what you did. And in a sense, Paul's a different man, but in another sense, he's carrying with him those memories of the things that he did. I really don't feel like any kind of physical persecution could have the same effect on Paul's psyche as this kind of mental persecution. What's the worst pain that you've ever experienced? Was it something that's physical, or is it something that's emotional? Most of us would be willing to relive that physical pain so that we didn't have to face that emotional pain again. Even if those memories of his past were not the thorn in the flesh that Paul was talking about here, we know that they kept him humble, and we know that he was constantly wrestling with them. As I was studying this verse, one word really jumped off the page to me, and that was the word given. So Paul didn't say, this thorn in the flesh was pressed into me. It was pushed on me. It was forced on me. But he said, it's been given to me, almost like it was a gift. And we know that Paul didn't like it. I mean, he prayed 3 times that God would take it away from him, but he came to the conclusion that this is something that God can use to make me more like him. Someone once asked me if I thought God would take away the awful memories of something that had happened to them in their past. And I said, God could definitely do that, but I don't think that he will. A lot of times, God will use those awful memories, things that we have done or things that have happened to us, to mold us, to make us into his image. Sometimes he'll use it to show us his grace like he did here with Paul. And sometimes he'll use it to help other people that have gone through similar situations so they can know that there's hope. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please consider subscribing, give this video a like, and if you think that there's somebody out there that it could help, share it on your social media platform. Until next time, thanks for watching.